FDA review of efficacy and safety of Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. This is dated December 10th, 2020, and it shows that the Pfizer trial and the USDA broke down the effectiveness of the vaccine into 7 different racial categories, because this was also a concern of theirs, and it would frankly be delinquent not to study the effects across the different
races.
But Mr.
Kennedy said it was bioengineered to target blacks and Caucasians.
The gentleman from Utah is recognized for 5 minutes.
And spare Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese people. That is different than
Time belongs to the gentleman from Utah.
Thank you, claiming my time.
We're highlighting here today that we now know that a growing list of the most important executive branch agencies of the Biden administration are in on it. They've also been corrupted. They've been weaponized to help cover all this up, the first family's crimes. When we summarize all this stuff, it sounds like a premise of a dystopian novel or something, but it's actually happening right now on our watch. This is not conspiracy theories, this is evidence. Our hearing today is to put a spotlight on one more of these incredible avenues of unprecedented corruption and government cover-up. And here again, a federal court has just affirmed all that hard evidence. It proves that the White House, the Department of Justice, and the FBI, among other agencies, threatened and coerced the social media platforms to censor and suppress disfavored viewpoints and conservatives' social media posts online.
Mr. Kennedy's and others here are claiming that they've been censored, but they actually have a huge megaphone. The rules that my colleague tried to bring up are rules that the Republicans made at the beginning of this Congress. They did not allow the Democrats to be part of that, and one of those rules was that if information or testimony might potentially defame an individual, that we would go in executive session. No one was trying to stop him from testifying, but not to give him the megaphone that this group has allowed him to have. I also note, in terms of censorship, that the far-right media has already issued articles about me playing the race card. The race card is something that's often used against Black people for bringing up when they see race hatred being propagated against them. And it's a means to try and keep us quiet and keep us in our place. Oh, you're playing the race card, by bringing up what is obvious in our lives, what is obviously happening, race. And so you can keep saying I'm race baiting and try and censor me, but I'm gonna continue to tell the truth. I wanna be abundantly clear about what else is happening in this room. The MAGA Republicans are trying to scare social media companies into not taking down blatantly false information in the lead up to our 2024 presidential election. Chair Jordan knows, as we do, that when conspiracy theories succeed, so does Donald Trump. Russia interfered in our 2016 election, they attempted in our 2020, and they're going to try to interfere in the 2024 presidential election. We note that Russian trolls sought to suppress the Black vote by unleashing a torrent of social media posts designed to stoke racial tensions and spread incorrect voting information. In 2021, our national intelligence agencies found that proactive information sharing between the government and social media companies facilitated the expeditious review and, in many cases, removal of social media accounts covertly operated by Russia and Iran.
A government that can censor its critics has license for every atrocity. It is the beginning of totalitarianism. There's never been a time in history when we look back and the guys who were censoring people were the good guys. All of us grew up reading Arthur Koestler, Robert Heinlein, Aldous Huxley, George Orwell, and they were all saying the same thing. Once you start censoring, you're on your way to dystopia and totalitarianism.
And I know my time has expired, but Mr. Sauer, you said earlier, censorship is about power. Censorship is about control. And the entire progressive leftist agenda is about nothing more than dependency and control. That is why this is so important. With that,
the chair now recognizes himself. Hard evidence. Mr. Johnson said that we're not only witnesses to censorship, we were victims. The Republican website on the House Judiciary Committee posted this story, and it was limited where it could go. You got to, they exercise censorship of the House Judiciary Republican account, for goodness sake. Ms. Wiley, you were a lawyer for the ACLU?
I was.
Mr. Kennedy, I remember when the ACLU defended they were the champions of the First Amendment. You remember that? You remember that, ACLU?
I remember when the ACLU represented Nazis who they were appalled by.
Appalled, disgusted by, and yet they would defend the crazy things they said, right? That's how much the First Amendment meant to them, right?
Exactly.
I want to go back to where Mr. Stubbe was. I want to talk about this hard evidence that Mr. Goldman says doesn't exist. I want to read from the facts. This is what the White House was saying. I want to go to just 3 statements. One, cannot stress this is statements from the Biden White House to social media, cannot stress the degree to which this needs to be resolved immediately. Please remove this account immediately. Same kind of thing they put on yours, remove ASAP. But here's the better one. Here's the better one. Mr. Flaherty, who ran this COVID operation misinformation concept at the White House, Mr. Flaherty said this, not to sound like a broken record, how much content is being demoted and how effective are you at mitigating reach and how quickly? And we should just translate that because this is real simple. How much censorship are you doing How much censorship are you doing and how quickly are you doing it? But I think the kicker is what Jen Psaki, the press secretary, said back in 2021. Look at this. Now think about this. The press secretary, we're talking about the White House, considered the center of freedom on the planet. The press secretary in the press room says this: we are in regular touch with these social media platforms, and those engagements typically happen through members of our senior staff, but also members of our COVID-19 team. We're flagging problematic posts for Facebook that spread disinformation, their definition, of course. Psaki also stated one of the White House asks was of social media companies to create a robust enforcement strategy. So you got the press secretary in the press room in the White House saying we're going to limit the press. Now that is frightening. That is frightening.
And frightening it is. I guess I should unmute my mic. Welcome to another InfoWars press. But yes, Travis, I know. It's early in the morning after a late night last night. And so today I want to welcome my very good friend, Lori Spencer. Lori has been a journalist for a lot longer than I have. And she's from Maverick News, a reliable news source where you can hear the truth. And she was up most of her night streaming on her Strange Bedfellows podcast. So I urge you to check that out. And so, Lori, welcome.
Hi, Kevin. Hey, good to see you. I'm awake. It is 2 o'clock in the morning here in the central United States. I'm in Oklahoma. I got my cup of coffee, my Kennedy for President coffee mug, and I'm up for another great conversation. It sounds like you had a late night too over there, and not in a good way.
Well, I had a late night. It was about midnight, 12:30 last night when we started hearing what we thought was aircraft, which is unusual to begin with. But it went on for about 2 hours, two and a half hours. There was a large launch of Calibre missiles from the Black Sea, about, 160 kilometers from us. People ask how you can hear things like that late at night, but you do, and they're loud. They are quite large missiles. I counted roughly 52 launches over that period of time, if I counted correctly at that time of night. But I am guessing this was a response to another strike on a Crimean ammunition depot. Now, the 2 ammunition depots that were hit this week were old Soviet ammo. So it's stuff that was mothballed. You hear in the West that it was, the largest ammo storage in Crimea. They actually weren't. So
Interesting. So do you think that they knew that when they hit that old depot, or are they just hitting anything that they can hit right now?
I think they're hitting anything that the U.S. and the British point them at. Who knows what they really knew? I couldn't say that right at the moment. So
this is retaliation. This is a retaliatory strike from.
I think this is a warning. Don't hit Crimea, or we will destroy things.
Yeah. Well, those Ukrainians, they're hard-headed, boy. They don't they don't listen, do they?
Well, I don't know if they're hard-headed or if the United States is.
Yeah, that's more like it. That's more accurate.
Most of what I hear is their strikes are, directed by the British and the Americans.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
So, Lori, you just recently released a year's worth of research. You want to tell us about that?
Oh, the Nord Stream pipeline research?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just did a Maverick News special report about that, actually, which you can see on my YouTube channel. I've been digging into this, Kevin, since it happened.
Yep.
And, you and I, we're a little older. We remember the 80s. In fact, I would reckon in the early 80s, you were probably working in the United States military or some branch thereof. So you probably remember the Trans-Siberian Pipeline explosion of 1982. Most people don't know about it. Even older folks like us who remember it, we forgot it 40 years ago. It was a story that was in the news for a few days, and then everybody just forgot about it. The Americans didn't talk about it. The Russians sure as hell didn't talk about it. The Soviets. And it was a spy caper, basically. Long and short of it is, I'm trying to point out to my fellow Americans and people in the West that, if we blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, and I think it's very likely that we were behind that, it wouldn't be the first time. It would not be the first time that the United States and the CIA specifically blew up a Russian natural gas pipeline that was carrying natural gas from Russia to Western Europe at supplying abundant, cheap energy in a deal that was very beneficial to the, Western Europe, particularly Germany, and that we stabbed our allies in the back by blowing up and sabotaging a pipeline that brought them a lot of affordable energy. And it was all because it was the Cold War, because the Soviets were the evil empire, as President Reagan put it. And remember, Reagan was president in 1982. This was Reagan's CIA. It was largely George Bush, who else, trying to sabotage the energy market, because what was Bush invested in? Oil and gas?
Gas and oil.
There you go. There you go. It was the whole thing was because we were not about to let Russia, the Soviets, get an inroad or an upper hand on us during the energy race and the Cold War of the 1980s. And our current Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, wrote a college thesis when he was a college student at Harvard. And it was published as a book in 1987. It's all about the Trans-Siberian Pipeline crisis. And it was a crisis between the NATO allies and the Soviets over this pipeline being built. And the United States was determined to stop it one way or another. Reagan tried to embargo parts, saying that our Western partners couldn't sell parts to the Soviets for this pipeline. And when that didn't work, because our NATO partners spoke up, they said, hey, it's not your place, United States, to tell us who we can and cannot do business with. and we like the idea of cheap energy. It's in our best interest. So to heck with you, we're going to do this pipeline with the Soviets. Now that was 1982. 5 years
And then
later.
yeah.
Sorry, do you have a question?
Oh, I was going to say, and then, we get to more modern days. We've got the Nord Stream and the U.S. saying, Germany, don't you dare do it. And Germany saying, well, we're going to do what we want.
That's right.
So, it's the same story over and over. Take money out of the other side's pocket, boost our profits and harm our own allies.
That's right. And, in 1982, we didn't do as much damage. The pipeline, yes, it exploded. And when it exploded, it was the largest non-nuclear explosion ever recorded on planet Earth. It was seen from space. It was a huge explosion. Thankfully, nobody was killed. It was out in remote Siberia, blew up in the middle of nowhere. Nobody was killed. I don't think anybody was seriously injured. And so people just kind of forgot about it. But when the Nord Stream pipeline blew up, older people like me, and probably a lot of people over there in Russia, immediately remembered, the Trans-Siberian pipeline. Yeah. And we didn't know, at least the Americans didn't know, and I bet the Soviets didn't either. We didn't know who'd done it. Nobody knew who blew up that damn pipeline for 22 more years. And then finally, some of the CIA people who were involved bragged about it in their own memoirs. Gus Weiss, Thomas Reed, National Security Council advisor to President Reagan, wrote a book about it. And Secretary Blinken wrote a book about it called Ally versus Ally. And of course, it's a rare book now. It was a limited edition printing back in 1987. You can still find paper copies at high prices, or you can just read it for free at the Internet Archive. And I would recommend that you check it out. Check out my special report. It's about 90 minutes and walks you through the whole story of what happened back in 1982 and the incredible similarities to what just happened with Nord Stream. If you need any further proof, any more evidence, and who's the guy who's been probably the most aggressive in our policy, especially as it regarded Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2, Antony Blinken. He literally wrote the book about this back in 1987, and it's based upon the last time we blew up a Russian pipeline carrying natural gas to Europe. It's astonishing how many people don't know, and I think a lot of people over there in Russia still don't know about it.
Yeah. Where can people find your report other than linked on Twitter?
You can find it on YouTube. My channel is called Strange Bedfellows Podcast, and that's the name of my show. And that was a special report we did on Maverick News with Rick Walker and I.
Yep. Good show to watch. Those
you.
of you who want to see differing ideas being compared in a respectful manner should watch Lori's show, Strange Bedfellows. Really what debate should be these days, rather than what you see in social media with people calling names and all that. So I highly recommend her show.
And so much like we just saw in that House Judiciary Committee hearing that turned so acrimonious and so nasty with Kennedy and the members of his own party this week. And we're going to talk about that. But, I like to say, and Kennedy said right there in his opening statement, how, he's the Strange Bedfellows candidate. His whole candidacy and what he said in his opening statement, that's what my show is all about. It's the idea of getting people who are political opposites, right, and would otherwise be trading insults and fighting with each other to actually sit down face to face and talk. And when you do that in a civil way, and you just come to understand the other guy's point of view, that's half the battle, is putting yourself in their shoes. That's the soul of diplomacy. It's the way out of our international crisis, and it's also the way out of our internal crisis here in the United States. It's the only way to heal that divide.
And RFK, excuse me, RFK Jr. actually talks about that in his opening statements.
He does.
For those of you who, excuse me, those of you who were not here early, you can go back and watch the first, about 17 minutes of this stream, and it's all in there. I do have part of it queued up here. So let's take a listen to that.
Kennedy announced his campaign for president of the United States. During his campaign announcement, he stated, quote, "My mission over the next 18 months of this campaign and throughout my presidency will be to end the corrupt merger of state and corporate power that is threatening to impose a new kind of corporate feudalism in our country," end quote. It is for this that Mr. Kennedy finds himself receiving the scorn of both the political left and right. Because if one dares challenge the orthodoxy of the powers that be, then one is their enemy. That truism was lost during the COVID pandemic. Individuals receiving scorn simply for asking questions, people being silenced for challenging the status quo. These are the kinds of questions that should have been publicly debated, and this hearing is focused on that truth, and we welcome Mr. Kennedy.
Excuse me, point of order. I know that witnesses usually have 5 minutes. I see 10 minutes on the board. Is it going to be 10 minutes for
We'll give
every
him 5
witness?
minutes, but we're pretty lax with this. We'll let him go for
We are?
a little, yeah.
I've seen you gavel down on quite a number of
We've
witnesses.
given senators and former Democrat members of Congress and all kinds
He's
of folks my
neither.
time. I
He's
know.
neither.
I'm just saying in past history.
Okay,
in
okay.
committee. But
Let's just watch the time for all the witnesses.
And if
then.
you want to cut him off and censor him some more, you're welcome to do it.
Oh, that's not my job. That's your job. Why don't you threaten a witness so that they can not want to be a
Mr.
witness?
Kennedy is recognized for his opening statement. We'll give him 5 minutes, more or less, and then we'll move to the next one. Mr. Kennedy, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, maybe we could put 5 minutes on the clock then, not 10.
Could we put 5 on the clock and start it running?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to start. I want to put aside my written statement for a moment and address one of the points that was brought up. I think an important point by the ranking member, that this body ought to be concerning itself with issues that impact directly the American people. The rising price of groceries, 76% over the past 2 years for basic foodstuff, the war in Ukraine, the inflation issues, the border issues, many, many other issues that concern us all as a nation. We can't do that without the First Amendment, without debate. When I gave my speech, my announcement speech in Boston 2 months ago, YouTube, I talked about all those issues. I focused on grocery. I focused on the fact that working class people can no longer afford to live in this country. I talked about inflation, all the issues that deeply concern you, and that you've devoted your career to alleviating those issues. 5 minutes into my speech, when I was talking about Paul Revere, YouTube deplatformed me. I didn't talk about vaccines in that speech. I didn't talk about anything that was a verboten subject. I just was talking about my campaign and things, the conversation that we ought to be having with each other as Americans. But I was shut down, and that is why the First Amendment's important. Debate, congenial, respectful debate is the fertilizer, it's the water, it's the sunlight for our democracy. We need to be talking to each other. Now, this is a letter that many of you signed, many of my fellow Democrats. I've spent my life in this party. I've devoted my life to the values of this party. This 102 people signed this. This itself is evidence of the problem that this hearing was convened to address. This is an attempt to censor a censorship hearing.
Yep. So We'll wait for Lori to come back here in a minute. Yeah, we're getting some good questions in the chat, and we will address those a little later. Or if we've lost Lori temporarily, I can
Hey,
go to
I'm
that as
here.
well. Oh,
I'm
you're
here.
here.
Yeah, I
Okay.
just turned off my camera while we were watching his remarks. I had a couple of observations on that. First of all, I don't
Me
know
too.
where you found that particular camera angle, but it's interesting. It's different from the one I saw. I also
Fox
brought some
News.
clips, but was that from Fox News?
That's from Fox News on YouTube.
Oh,
Yeah.
very interesting. Because the camera, you notice, we never got to see Mr. Kennedy in the video that you're playing. We hear him, but the camera is trained on the faces of the Congress critters. And it's so
Yeah.
interesting to watch their response to him talking. You look over here where the Democrats sit, right? And a lot of them walked
all-
out of the room. They refused to even hear him out. They just left. The ones that stayed had this sour, scowl on their faces, and they just looked like they were being tortured having to listen to this guy. Then you look on the other side of the dais, and you look
They're
at the Republicans.
smiling. Yeah.
They're smiling. They're loving what he has to say. They're sitting there in rapt attention. And sometimes I would swear, especially Jim Jordan was, practically worshipful of this guy. And if I could read their minds, Kevin, I'm sitting there thinking, or they're thinking what I think they're thinking. I think they're thinking, how do I get out of endorsing Donald Trump? I really like this guy. Or DeSantis. How do I get out of endorsing DeSantis? I'm already committed to Trump or DeSantis and the guys in my own party. But if I could, I think I'd probably vote for Mr. Kennedy over here. I really sensed that.
I've told you several times, Mr. Kennedy actually sounds more like a Republican than a Democrat.
He does. He's,
What
he's in the wrong party. That's what I'm always saying. He's in the wrong party.
I picked that particular camera view because of those reactions. And if you watch the whole 30 minutes that I put on the beginning, it's over and over the same thing. Now, in the clip we just did, the thing that I noticed is he hasn't even started speaking yet. And they're already complaining about, only 5 minutes, put 5 minutes on the clock. They're arguing amongst themselves about, are we lenient, aren't we? And for those who actually watch these hearings, the Republicans are a bit hard on witnesses that are not speaking what they want to hear. So I will give the Democrats that. But
the partisan bickering is just so ugly, and I hate to see that in Congress, where there is supposed to be and has traditionally had a level of decorum. That's out the window in recent years, and I hate to see that happening in our country.
Yeah, I'd say about the last 10 or 12 years.
Yeah, that's about right. Another thing that he pointed out, and I can confirm this because I should probably tell your viewers, full disclosure, I am a volunteer recruiter on the Kennedy 24 campaign. I'm actually working for the campaign. So I just wanted to let people know that I'm not totally unbiased here, okay? I do have a bias. He is my candidate, and I'm working very hard to try and get him elected. But Kevin, I've got my work cut out for me because he's running in the Democratic Party primary. My job is how the heck do I convince Democrats to vote for a guy whom they want to censor? And I can confirm, because I work with the campaign, what he said there was true. In his opening remarks, he talked about his announcement speech in Boston back on April 19th when he announced his candidacy. 5 minutes into that speech, we were live streaming it on the official Team Kennedy YouTube channel. 5 minutes into the speech, YouTube killed the stream live, which left us hanging because we had all of these media outlets taking that feed, including Maverick News, and everybody's stream just went black because YouTube pulled the stream. And then 1 week later, I do a podcast about the Kennedy campaign, about Bobby. And the first episode, I uploaded it to YouTube. It was immediately pulled down, removed after 5 minutes. I hadn't even had it on my channel for 5 minutes.
And you got a warning, didn't
And
you?
I got a strike. They put it the first time I'd ever had a strike on my channel ever. And I do a lot of controversial topics, but I've never had a strike until I started reporting on the Kennedy campaign. And then a week after that, they put you in YouTube jail for 7 days. You can't post, you can't upload, you can't go live. And then after I got out of my first 7-day sentence in jail, the very next day, I uploaded another video about Robert Kennedy, and immediately they took that one down, gave me a second strike for medical misinformation. And it's interesting because we weren't even talking about the vaccines in that particular show. It was just the mention of his name. If they see his name or his initials in the description, it gets flagged by the AI algorithm as medical misinformation. So that was my second strike. They demonetized my channel. They also demonetized Maverick News and all of our Maverick News channels, again, for our Kennedy reporting. And then when I got out of that jail sentence, I think that was 2 weeks, I got back on the air, and within a couple of days, I uploaded another video about Robert Kennedy because, for heaven's sake, he's a presidential candidate. We ought to be able to talk about him on YouTube. And immediately they hit me with the third and fatal strike, and they killed my channel permanently. So my Strange Bedfellows podcast is a new channel that I just started to kind of start all over again. But I lost thousands of videos, thousands of subscribers, income. That was my primary source of income. And so now this is becoming a problem for Kennedy because he's doing the podcast circuit, right? And he's getting invited on all these big podcasts. But as soon as he goes on, those videos, the same thing happens to those creators. For example, Jordan Peterson had his interview with Robert Kennedy removed. Same with Mike Tyson, Kim Iverson, the Indie News Network, Dark Journalists. The list goes on and on. It's not just me. There are so many others that this is happening to. Even Mike Tyson and Theo Vaughn, the comic. Kennedy wants to go back on their programs. And now the people running those channels are like, I don't know about having you back because they're going to strike me again. And this is my income. This is my living. If they demonetize my channel, I literally can't pay my rent. So it's a tough choice for creators on YouTube who are just trying to cover a presidential candidate. That that's how YouTube controls you. They make you self-censor. And if you won't self-censor, they'll censor it for you and just take your platform away and take your income away.
Yeah, well, thank you, Google. Because if people don't know, that's who owns YouTube.
Yep.
I'm not monetized, so
Good for you.
I don't care. But just so everybody knows, if my channels disappear, all of my videos are on Rumble. So, and I assume, Lori, that you're streaming on Rumble at this point as well.
I am. Not this show. I couldn't seem to connect my Rumble channel to yours. But yeah, I do stream on Rumble. And you know what? Maverick News and my channels, we have a much bigger audience on Rumble now than we ever had on YouTube. So that is great to see. I'm glad to see people are watching on non-censorship platforms. And so, yeah, these days I'm pretty much loving Twitter. I do a lot of Twitter spaces. There's no censorship there. Elon's been very kind. Throughout the whole pandemic and the censorship city that we've been living in, Twitter is the only platform that never censored me. I got kicked off of Facebook for my reporting on Russia. They did not like my reporting on Russia. They didn't like what I said about COVID either. And I got censored off YouTube. But Twitter, I've been on Twitter since 2016, and I've never once had a tweet taken down. And that's kind of amazing that they let me get away with the things I say on Twitter. But thankfully, big shout out to Twitter. They've been very, very good to me. And, speaking of Twitter spaces, the other night I was on one of those huge Twitter spaces that was hosted by Mario Nawfal. Had like 300,000 people listening on this Twitter space. And of course, they have a panel of people who are kind of, talking about all these different subjects. The panel, you'd have representatives of the DeSantis camp, the Trump camp, the Biden camp. I was representing the Kennedy camp. Barely got a word in edgewise, Kevin, because the Republicans and the Democrats were just so busy fighting with each other, and it got ugly, and they're calling each other names. And you know who else was on that panel? Lev Parnas, right? The Ukrainian crook, convicted criminal. He was on that Twitter space, and he's the only one who was managing to keep it civil. But you had Dr. Sebastian Gorka was there, calling him a convicted criminal, and then the ultimate insult, he called him a Russian.
Oh my!
Ooh, you don't call a Ukrainian nationalist a Russian. That's like the worst insult, right? Ever. And so then Lev got mad. And so it just turned into all this. And when it was finally my turn, I could barely get in a word in edgewise. They finally let me say something. And I said, it's all this bickering. This Twitter space is a perfect example of why millions of Americans are going to vote for Robert Kennedy, because we're tired of the partisan back and forth, Republicans versus Democrats, and all the ugliness and the nastiness of it, and the lack of civil discourse. That's why we're voting for Kennedy. And everybody on that Twitter space, just shut up. I killed it. I killed the party. After that, they couldn't yell at each other anymore, because they realized that they looked and sounded really childish, really dumb. And I hope that in some small way, in my 2 minutes of airtime, that I made a difference. And I think I did, because after that, everybody just kind of calmed down, and they closed the Twitter space shortly thereafter.
Yeah. Well, I noticed in this censorship hearing, the same thing went on. It was constantly, they would complain when they didn't let the Democratic witnesses talk, or when they cut them off because of time. And I noticed they let Mr. Kennedy talk every time he talked for a full 10 minutes. So, but the Democrats constantly were interrupting him. They'd ask him a question, and he'd start to answer, and they'd cut him off and say, "Oh, I want my time back. I want my time back." And, they acted like a bunch of children.
Yeah, they did.
Even that majority head, or whatever she's called.
Oh, the ranking member, yeah.
The ranking member, she says, "Oh, everybody says you're pulling the race card, and that's censoring me." And then she turns around and she pulls the race card. So, well, Mr. Kennedy, you talked about this about black people and that, and the Chinese, and these are things he never talked about.
No, that's not what was said. That's not, and thankfully, Representative Massey actually put what he did say and a copy of that study that he was quoting into the congressional record. In fact, I brought a clip about that. While you talk, I'm going to cue it up.
Yeah, cue that up.
Okay.
So, they kept saying, "Show us this, show us that." And they actually, the Republicans did pull this information out. Tell us what poll said this. Tell us what document said that. They pulled this stuff up. They quoted it. So, it just takes a little research, people. When you hear things, go out and look for it. since I'm speaking of that, and Lori's still queuing this up, I'm actually going to call out a Telegram channel that many people consider quite reliable, DD Geopolitics. And today they posted basically a lie that on Wikipedia, the Russian Wikipedia site had been edited at 11 p.m. last night before the strikes on Odessa, claiming that it had been edited to show that the Orthodox Church had been destroyed by the Russians. And in fact, I looked at that and it's like, that doesn't make sense. And I went out and I looked, and the Wikipedia site was edited when they said, but it wasn't that history. That was not actually added until about 3 a.m. this morning. So you really need to check into what you're seeing and hearing, even if you think it's a reliable source. Maria Butina said that to me. She says, don't believe anything I say, look for yourself. You ready,
Absolutely.
Lori?
Yeah, I think I've got this queued up. Yes, here we go. You can add it.
Coda's
Okay.
recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to yield my time to Representative Massey.
I thank the gentleman from North Dakota. Wow, the irony and cognitive dissonance from the other side of the aisle. It's deafening. You could cut it with a knife. They are at the same time denying that censorship is occurring, but suggesting that there's more material that needs to be censored. This is a hearing on censorship that began with an effort, with a formal motion from the other side of the aisle to censor Mr. Kennedy. They do not want him to speak, yet that is the topic of this hearing. They have kept him from speaking. A collusion between the government and private organizations. Mr. Kennedy, in your opening statement, you introduced us to this word malinformation. Can you tell us more about this made-up word, what it means, and some of the things that you've said or tried to say that you've been censored for that's been characterized as malinformation?
Yes, Congressman Massey, and if by your leave, I'd like to just respond
Please.
briefly to some of the what I would call defamations that have been just applied to me by the ranking member. I'm happy to talk to you about my opinions on these issues, what you have stated and tried to associate me with through guilt by association is simply inaccurate. Virtually everything, every statement that you just made about me is inaccurate. I have never advised Black Americans not to receive vaccines. At one point you say I'm anti-vax, and that's a bad thing. The other moment you point out that all my children are vaxxed. I'm fully compliant with the vaccine schedule myself, except for COVID. I took flu vaccines for 20 years straight. I have never been anti-vax. I have never told the public avoid vaccination. The only thing I've asked for, and my views are constantly misrepresented, so that the truth of what I believe is not, we're not allowed to have a conversation about that with the American people, which I believe vaccines should be tested with the same rigor as other medicines and medications. You tried to associate me a moment ago with the replacement theory, which is racist.
No, I did not say you
Time
had the
belongs to the
replacement
gentleman
theory.
from
I
I
said
did
my
not-
colleagues.
Time belongs to the gentleman from
I
Kentucky.
denounce that theory. It is racist, and I have never endorsed it or had any association with it. Our film on a medical, by the way,
Medical
Bill
apartheid?
Buxton, who is the Black CDC official who ultimately exposed the Tuskegee experiment, tried for years and years to appeal to CDC to stop it for 40 years. Finally, he got relief by walking into my uncle's office in the building next door. Teddy held hearings and ended the experiment. I remember that very well. And to say that I created a film that encourages blacks not to get adequate medical care is just completely abhorrent.
Don't misuse my words.
It's the
sir.
witness's time. Do not censor the witness.
I'm not censoring the witness. I'm not censoring the witness. He's still
If
talking.
it is
I don't
it's my
have the
time and I've
ability to
given it to the witness. Do not censor him.
I'm not censoring him.
If the views that you and others have applied to me, I've attributed to me, if they were actually true, I can see why I shouldn't be able to testify here today.
Right.
Those are not true. These are defamations and malignancies that are used to censor me, to prevent people from listening to the actual things that I'm saying. And I think, ranking member, that we should have a real conversation rather than an exchange of ad hominem attacks. And answer very quickly to your question, the term malinformation was coined to describe information that Facebook and Twitter and the other social media sites understood was true, but that the White House and other federal agencies wanted censored anyway for political reasons because it challenged official orthodoxies. I'll give you one example. I was included in a group called the Disinformation Dozen. And Facebook and others were asked to censor us, which they did. And by the way, my Heck Aaron post, it was taken down. My whole Instagram account with 900,000 people was taken down because of that. So they knew, Facebook knew that the disinformation doesn't claim it. And what they said was the disinformation came from this very shady group for preventing digital hate in England that's funded by dark money that should be looked into. They claim that 65% of the vaccine misinformation on the internet was generated by those 12 people. Facebook itself said that is impossible. That is false information. We know that not to be true. And yet, when the White House asked them to censor this disinformation dozen, including me, they did it anyway, when they knew it to be untrue.
My time has expired. I yield back.
Wow. We better stop there because once they start talking about vaccines and they get into that whole argument, we're going to get censored off of YouTube. So we better stop right there. I had to choose my clips with care.
I find his malinformation term interesting. In case people don't know, the Department of Defense has an actual term for malinformation, propaganda, and censoring in the DoD dictionary, and it's called perception management. So this is actually what all this censoring and propaganda is for, is to change people's perception of things.
Perception management. So do they call it malinformation in the DoD dictionary?
No. The only thing they will refer to it is perception management.
Well, Bobby said at the hearing, he said they literally had to invent a new word just for me, malinformation, which did sort of become a thing during the pandemic. It was a word I'd never heard before. I'd heard disinformation, misinformation, and perception management. But malinformation, it was one of those things that just made me go, what exactly is that? Now, he defines it as information that the government doesn't like, that runs counter to the official narrative. I'd say that's a pretty good definition, wouldn't you?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So
malinformation.
Malinformation.
They hate him so much they had to come up with a new word to describe him and put him on a list of the disinformation dozen.
Well, they couldn't call it what it really was. In this hearing, the Democrats go on, they say, the Republicans are complaining because they want misinformation removed, and they don't want, the Russians, they should be, the Republicans want them to be able to interfere in the 2024 elections. And Prigozhin So, like, Prigozhin really has any say about things, but they're going on about things that have been proven false. It wasn't the Russians involved in 2016.
Right.
And, you know, if they looked at the Twitter files, they would see how guilty they are.
It's all there, and they're pretending that it doesn't exist. They're still acting like the Mueller investigation never happened. They're acting like the Twitter files haven't happened, and that this ruling in Missouri versus Biden didn't happen. You know?
Yeah.
And the White
Well,
House's response to that ruling in the courts, of course, they appealed, but the Biden White House is basically saying, I don't care what the court said. I'm going to keep censoring you anyway with my friends in big tech because we're all on the same page politically. And we agree that we don't like what you say. So we're just going to keep censoring you.
and to keep
Wow.
repeating, I'm not censoring him over and over so that he can't talk,
Yeah.
is censoring him.
It's censoring him. Absolutely. That's exactly what that was. You know? Oh, Choosy's up late. There's one of our Maverick News regulars. You know,
Yeah.
Kevin's becoming a regular on Maverick News. We love having you on the program. You're always
well.
the guy, the go-to guy anytime something happens in Crimea. Now I have an excellent source on the ground there. So thank you for all of the great
Yeah.
coverage you've done for us. And
My
isn't it
pleasure.
something that now they're trying to, the latest tactic is to try and smear Bobby with the same smear they used against Trump and Tulsi Gabbard and even Dennis Kucinich. You know, they're
Yeah.
saying that they're all agents of Putin and they're just parroting Russian propaganda.
Well, and a
Literally.
few days ago, I did a short piece on this. I don't remember his name, the Ukrainian propagandist in the States, where he posts this picture, supposedly that Kennedy used of a Russian woman wearing a Kennedy T-shirt, and
yes.
yeah,
I saw
and
that.
I pretty much guarantee you there's nobody in Russia wandering around with Kennedy T-shirts on. They would have no way to get them.
I was
But
wondering, have you seen any Kennedy T-shirts over there in Crimea?
no, and the signs in that picture, the only readable words are the same in Russian and Ukrainian. So it is my belief that that was actually a Ukrainian woman.
You think?
Yeah.
Interesting.
of
It was
course,
just a stock
Facebook-
photo. Yeah.
It's
stock
probably a
photo.
stock photo. Yeah. And
Yeah, I can tell you for sure that it was. The campaign staff made a goof. They were designing some photos for merchandise advertising, and somebody apparently didn't look closely at the signs in the background and think about the political implications of that. So they tweeted out that photo through Mr. Kennedy's official account and had to quickly delete it because it got, you know, people out there, the internet sleuths said, hey, what the hell? Why do you have Russian language on your official merchandise? It was an awkward goof, I must admit, and it didn't help. You know, for those that say, you know, that Kennedy's some kind of agent of Russia, it only added fuel to their fire. So it was a goof and nothing more. It was a mistake.
Yeah. Well, as Peter says here, Peter's in Sochi for a couple of days, and he's finding no Kennedy T-shirts there. So
Well,
I know he's looking.
you don't see too many Vladimir Putin T-shirts in the United States either. I can tell you
Yeah.
that. Even
I have a
though a lot
couple.
of
I should have worn
Americans
one.
like him.
Yeah.
A lot of
Yeah.
Americans would vote for Putin if they could, but they can't, and they can't even say it out loud because our political climate is so dangerous now. You just saw at that hearing, McCarthyism is back. You saw McCarthyism on display there. What they were doing to Mr. Kennedy is exactly what Senator Joe McCarthy used to do to people, and it's back. So if you do support Putin in the United States, if you wore a Vladimir Putin T-shirt walking down the street, you'd be asking to get your ass kicked. You'd be, you know, inviting a
I've done
fight. Who knows what might happen? So people might want to wear such a T-shirt but they're afraid to right now. And it reminds me very much of the Cold War period when if you were a little bit pink, maybe you were a communist or a fellow traveler, you had to keep that on the down low because they'd come ruin you. They would ruin
Yeah.
your life, ruin your career, ruin your finances, ruin your reputation. Or worse, they might
Well,
prosecute you. And,
like
Kennedy's
look at
experiencing
Scott
that
Ritter.
now. And
Oh,
look what they've
Scott.
done to Scott. Yes, our friend Scott. Perfect example,
Yeah.
you know?
So,
And I
oh,
see Peter, yeah, that's the reason he left the United States and is now in Russia. And you know what's crazy, Kevin? That's probably why you're there and why several friends of mine have moved to Russia. And they say that they feel more free, that they have more freedom of speech, not less, even under wartime censorship. You know, they actually feel much more free over there.
yeah. And
Wow.
we don't have the censorship of Western media here either. The only two sites that are censored here officially are CNN and BBC. And of course,
Good.
people still look at them using VPN. I highly recommend everybody get VPN. Listen to the news on the other side sometimes. It is available.
Yes, you should.
So,
You should. And that's
yeah.
why I'm not a, I laughed when you said that and I said good, but I don't really mean that. I feel like you should be allowed to watch whatever news you want to watch. I think it's as wrong to ban CNN in Russia as I feel that it's wrong for France and Europe and the United States to ban RT or Press TV. I think that all media should be available. You should be able to consume whatever media you want, think what you want, speak what you want. Period.
I agree with you. Um, I actually had a discussion with Maria Butina about this because she said that I think you saw it in that interview I did with her that
Good.
no media should be banned. You should be able to see both sides. But people need to understand that Russia does their own propaganda. They're not nearly as good as the United States is. But, they've blocked two sites. So, I also want to point out to people because many people don't know this. They follow channels like Prigozhin, RFK Jr. These guys aren't putting their own tweets out. You may think they are, but they aren't. So, do your research. See, and I'm getting
It's good
curious about
advice. I have a
Mr. Wonderful. Everybody knows who he is except me.
ah, he's a good friend, a very good friend,
Yeah.
and someone who's here in the United States, but a big supporter of Russia and not afraid to say so. He's got the courage to say, I stand with Russia. These days, that takes some courage in the United States, like I was just saying. So I
Well,
wanted
you're
to show you another clip from Kennedy's testimony, which I found particularly disturbing and abhorrent. I'm going to take a look at this one. I'll roll it on my side if you can add it on yours.
is that
York mentioned
this one?
a poll. I would just ask that she
You got it.
identify
That's
what
it.
poll that is and if we could enter it into the record.
I'm sure she'll be
We
happy.
will submit it for the record.
Can you identify what it is?
Sure, I will submit it for the record, and you'll be able to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we respectfully requested that you rescind Mr. Kennedy's invitation to appear here due to his repeated and very recent statements that spread dangerous anti-Semitic and anti-Asian conspiracy theories and attempted to move into executive session because House rules prohibit public testimony that degrades or defames people. His reckless rhetoric helped fuel anti-Semitic incidents, which for the record are at the highest level in the United States since 1970. They have nearly tripled in the last 6 years. Since you gave Mr. Kennedy a megaphone today, I want to give him a chance to correct his statements and prepare some of the harm that he's helped cause. Mr. Kennedy, you're well educated. So yes or no, please. Are you aware that for centuries, Jews have been scapegoated and blamed for causing illnesses like Black Plague and more recently COVID?
I am. Those are known as blood libel, and they are one of the worst and most disturbing parts of human history.
Good. I'm glad to know that. Of course, that you acknowledge that. Of course, it's true and well documented that this pernicious form of anti-Semitism led to centuries of discrimination, even horrific pogroms and massacres, and it still fuels deadly violence. Coronavirus was bioengineered to target Caucasians and Black people, but to spare Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese people. Mr. Kennedy, your bizarre, unproven claim echoes that same historic slander of labeling Jews and Chinese people as a race, and that Jews, and in this case Chinese people, somehow managed to avoid a deadly illness that targets other groups for death. You do see that, yes or no?
You're misstating.
No. I quoted what you said earlier, and it is directly what you said. So just ask me yes or no.
I was describing an NIH-funded study.
No. You didn't cite any.
I was describing an NIH-funded study by Cleveland Clinic scientists.
Reclaiming my time. You did not reference reclaiming my
published
time.
in USC
Mr.
Medical,
Chairman,
which is one.
The time is mine. I'm reclaiming it. Please ask the witness to stop talking.
You asked me a question.
Reclaiming.
Allow me to answer my question.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like about 10 seconds back.
The time
You are
belongs.
slandering me
Time belongs to the-
incorrectly.
time belongs
You're
to the-
saying is dishonest.
Time belongs to
I
the
need
gentlelady
a
from
time to
Florida.
defend myself.
Mr.
Time
Chairman,
belongs to the gentlelady from Florida.
I'd like 15 seconds back.
We will be happy to give you that.
Thank you so much. You did not cite any study like you are citing here now during that conversation. You referenced no study at all. You simply labeled Jews and Chinese people as a race, and you also said that somehow they managed to avoid a deadly illness that targets other groups for death. You don't see that? You're trying to rewrite history here. A few months ago, Mr. Kennedy, you compared COVID public health policies to barbaric murderous tactics of Nazi Germany, saying that Jewish people in Nazi Germany had more freedom than Americans facing COVID health restrictions. In hindsight, Mr. Kennedy, do you reject this absurd and deeply hurtful and harmful comparison, or do you still stand by it?
Congressman, what you are saying is a lie.
That you said it.
No, I did not. I never continued.
Okay.
I never, ever.
Mr. Chairman, I'm
compared
happy to enter
COVID
into the record when Mr.
countermeasures.
Kennedy said that. I reclaim my time. In discussing COVID public health measures, you made light of the genocide against Jewish people by saying, and I quote, "Even Hitler's Germany, you could cross the Alps to Switzerland. You could hide in an attic like Anne Frank did." Mr. Kennedy, do you think it was easy for Jewish people to escape systematic slaughter of Nazis, yes or no?
Absolutely not.
Okay, good. Mr. Kennedy, do you think it was just as hard to wear a mask during COVID as it was to hide under floorboards or false walls so you weren't murdered or dragged to a concentration camp? Yes or no?
Excuse me?
That's a question, yes or no?
Excuse
I
me.
didn't hear your question.
Okay, I said, do you think it was just as hard to wear a mask during COVID as it was to hide under floorboards or false walls so you weren't murdered or dragged to a concentration camp?
Of course not. That's
Okay,
ridiculous.
but that's a comparison that you made.
I did
Mr.
not
Kennedy,
make that comparison.
Were the measures taken to contain the spread and fatalities related to COVID in any way at all comparable to the murder of 6 million Jews, yes or no?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Let's be very clear here. There's no legitimate comparison to the Holocaust. It doesn't matter if you're talking about AI, vaccine mandates, or anything else. There is no comparison. This comment, we would all move on. But there's a deeply disturbing pattern. In 2015, you apologized to all those, quote, whom I offended by my use of the word Holocaust to describe the autism epidemic. When discussing efforts to encourage others to get vaccinated for COVID-19, you said Nazis did that in the camps in World War II. They tested vaccines on gypsies and Jews. That was a quote.
Well, they
Much
did.
before you apologized for invoking
Yeah.
saying, quote,
The
"The events of
Japanese,
caused hurt. I am
yeah, the
truly
Japanese
sorry."
do
These
shows
are not real
about that.
statements of contrition or
Yes.
remorse. They are passive-aggressive non-apologies that blame the listener for reacting to the lie you just spread. I'm deeply saddened that this is a conversation we're having today. I have deep respect for what Mr. Kennedy's family did and still does to make life better for all Americans. But what you are doing now, Mr. Kennedy, and the forces you aligned yourself are dangerous and disturbing by echoing dangerous claims such as, quote, Jews don't really suffer as much as we do, which you said. Your rhetoric creates a climate of mistrust, antagonism, and even hatred or violence against Jewish people. My own children have been the targets of brutal anti-Semitism on social media. You fan those flames and jeopardize their safety. You've marginalized other groups too, like Asian Americans and the LGBTQ plus community. And worse, you don't seem to care or brush it all off to misquotes and misunderstanding. Frankly, it's disgusting. Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the balance of my
Mr. Chairman, I have unanimous.
Wow. Disgusting, she
Yeah.
called him. Deplorable. Unreal. But that's Debbie
Yeah.
Wasserman Schultz. And the same Debbie Wasserman Schultz, I would like to remind everybody, who was caught rigging the 2016 primaries in Hillary Clinton's favor and against Bernie Sanders. Now, that's a very clear signal, what she just did and what she did throughout that hearing the other day, along with all of the other powerful Democrats on that panel. They made it clear that they're going to do it again. They're going to Bernie this guy so hard.
Yep.
They've just basically putting it out there, just letting you know, Mr. Kennedy, we're not going to let you win a single primary in this party. We don't want you. We don't want you in our party. We don't like you, but we like the rest of your family. You know, the rest of your family, they're great. And you're a disgrace to your father and to your uncle. They literally went there. That's low. That's really low.
Well, and somebody earlier in the chat said the reason he couldn't run as a Republican is because the GOP hardliners wouldn't support him. And the only reason the hardliners wouldn't support him is because of his Kennedy name.
Perhaps. And also, you know, he is pro-choice. I think a lot of, a lot of hardliner or fundamentalist Christian Republicans would vote against him just on that issue alone.
Yeah.
You know,
we need to start or stop voting on party lines.
I agree.
What was her name the last Senate election? Geez, and I know her. I should remember it. But they excluded her from the debates.
Diane Sayre?
Diane Sayre.
From New York. Yeah. She, independent
Same
candidate.
thing.
She was running for Chucky Schumer's Senate seat, and they did everything they could to screw her at the debates, to keep her off the ballot. And there's already a movement out there, and I've seen it from, activist groups that call themselves progressive left, and they're trying to get Kennedy off the ballot in several states, just deny him ballot access. It's crazy.
Yeah. Free and fair elections, democracy. That's what they call it anyway.
Did you see that one guy during the vote to move to executive session or not? You know, Debbie Wasserman Schultz early in the hearing was trying to adjourn behind closed doors. They said, we're not censoring Kennedy. We just don't want the American people to hear him on television. We want to do this behind closed doors in executive session. So they took a vote. That motion failed. But there was a guy, Representative Connolly, and when it was his turn to vote, he said no to the Soviet Politburo. I was like, what? What did you just say?
Yeah. Hey, gee, come on out of the 80s.
Wow. It's just, I posted that on Twitter and it went viral. Everyone had the same reaction. What are you even talking about, bro? And I wonder, Kevin, how some of your older comrades over there in Russia and Ukraine and the old Soviet states feel if they remember the Soviet Union, when they see that kind of stuff going on in the United States. I wonder how it makes them feel.
People here don't pay a lot of attention to what's going on in the United States because they figured out a few years ago that things are so screwed up that it just isn't worth their time to listen to.
I understand. Feel the same way
So-
myself sometimes.
Yeah. The Soviet Union, that whole thing that you guys hear about, Putin wants the Soviet Union back and
Not true.
Russians do. I know many, many Russians pine for the days of the Soviet Union. They will admit things were not perfect, but everybody worked, everybody had a place to live, and, you know, mostly people ate. You know, there were mistakes in allocating, you know, what they were going to do over the next 5 years, and everybody makes those mistakes. But nobody is really looking for the Soviet Union to be back.
Yeah, that's what I hear. And it's good to hear you confirm that. And I know that, you know, they love to say that Putin's trying to bring back the Soviet Union. He most certainly is not. He's made it clear in speech after speech after speech that he doesn't want to return to the Soviet Union. And what I see from my perspective across the ocean, I see that Putin has been trying to find that balance, that hybrid sort of between capitalism and communism, where you take the best of both and you come up with an economic model that works for Russia. And it seems to be working pretty darn well for Russia.
You know, the whole he wants the Soviet Union back was the same thing they were doing in this hearing. They were twisting his words. You know, his actual words were that the mistake was how the Soviet Union was dissolved. You know, and it was. It left many people outside of their own countries, stuck in other countries. So it was a mistake how it was done. But
I saw a good
it is what
question
it
there
is.
from Baron Saturday in your chat. He said there's a Kennedy in the Republican Party. Yes, there is. No relation, I guess. You are correct. He's not a relation, but his name is John Kennedy. It's a little confusing to people. Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana is no relation to the Kennedy family, even though he shares the name of our late president.
Yeah. So we have a couple of other questions here. Imugi said, why isn't follow the money the standard procedure for journalism analysis?
Great question.
You know, for independent journalists like Lori, it is follow the money. You know, and it's what people really need to do when they're looking into things. But how do you feel about the Western mainstream media, Lori? Do they follow the money?
In terms of our reporting on stories, you mean, to get to the bottom of something? I mean, that's the golden rule of journalism that we learned from Woodward and Bernstein. My generation grew up going by that maxim. You know, I've been in journalism for 35 years. I've spent most of those years in corporate media, mostly radio and print. So we used to follow the money. That's how we were trained to do it. That's how all the great journalists do it, because that's where you're going to find the heart of the story, the heart of the matter. These days, no, I must say that there's a lack of curiosity among most journalists in corporate media about that. They've become merely stenographers for power, mouthpieces for the government, instead of asking tough questions of the government and of corporations. Those corporations are their corporate sponsors, and therein lies the rub. How are you supposed to get honest reporting on, say, certain injections that everyone was mandated to take? You really think you're going to get that from a network that's sponsored by Pfizer? Come on.
Yeah. So this is more of a comment, but I don't disagree. Have a standing peaceful standing military. You know, there needs to be revolution in America. I hate to wish that on anybody.
Exactly.
Because I can tell you, living where I do, it makes life interesting, but it isn't any fun.
Well, yeah. I mean, as a historian, I can tell you that we don't want to repeat the Civil War. I see a lot of my fellow Americans getting ready. They really want to take on the other side, Either they want to take on the other side, fight the liberals, or the liberals want to fight the QAnon people or the MAGA people. So that would be our civil war. But then there's also a movement of Americans who want to take on the government. They want another revolution. They want another 1776. They want to overthrow everybody and burn the damn thing down.
You got to
Neither
be
one is a
careful of
good
those
outcome.
Texans. Yeah, you have to be careful of those Texans.
That's right, darling. That's right.
And
I mean,
I'm
I
giving
hung
Lori
around
a hard time on that because she is one.
That's right. I grew up around that.
Yeah.
I'm a friend of the militias. I'm a strong, advocate of the Second Amendment, proud Texan. And our motto down in Texas is come and take it. If the government wants our guns, come and take them. We'll give you a fight. So,
Yeah.
and Texas does have a movement to secede from the Union, and that movement has been growing exponentially year by year as Texans continue to fight with the federal government. Right now, we're having a showdown over the southern border with the White House and with the federal government, who's just letting that border sit wide open. And Governor Abbott down in Texas is trying his best to protect it with what forces he has. But he's not getting any help from the federal government in securing the border. So there's a showdown brewing. There's trouble a brewing, as we say in the United States. And I'm afraid if we don't elect Robert Kennedy next year, then the next 4 to 8 years could be our worst nightmare. And I'm not saying that to fearmonger. That's, I'm not trying to scare people into voting for Kennedy. I'm just saying we are on a very dangerous path. We've been on this path and kept growing that divide deeper and deeper and wider. And there's so much hate on all sides towards each other, towards the government, towards the media, that the whole thing could get real ugly real quick. And you have no idea how quickly this could escalate. I'm afraid that Biden is so divisive, and honestly, so is Trump, that's just putting fuel on a fire that could very quickly rage out of control. And that is why I'm so committed to getting Kennedy elected. I think he's the only one who can cool the temperature, bring back some civil discourse, if the other side will cooperate. Otherwise, he's just talking to himself. We saw that hearing this week. There was no cooperation from his own side, Kevin.
And I'll be honest, he's saying the right things. His viewpoints of what he wants to do are the right things. My concern with any candidate in this day and age in the United States is that military-industrial complex. They need to clean house there. Putin made this statement. It was, 3-4 elections ago. Somebody asked him how he felt about, and I don't remember who it was that was running at the time, being president. And his statement was, all American politicians say what they're going to do in office. Many of them say the right things, but the minute they get elected, men in dark suits come in and tell them what they are and what they are not going to do. And this is my fear for him, as it will be a battle for him 100% of the time if he's elected.
Absolutely. I mean, I believe that Donald Trump went in with good intentions. I believe that he truly wanted to drain the swamp. I voted for Donald Trump in 2016. He lost my support for a number of reasons. Chief among them, of course, I'm a JFK historian, and I've been fighting to get those JFK files out of the government archives that have been kept secret for 60 years. And that came up on Trump's watch. The JFK Records Act expired in 2017. It was one of his first acts as president. And it was his job under the law to declassify and release everything, every last document. And he said he was going to do it. Remember, he put out a tweet saying, I'm going to release all the JFK files. And then the next day, he got a visit from the FBI and the CIA director, Mike Pompeo. they prevailed upon him one way or another. I don't know what
Yep.
they said. I don't know if any threats were made or if it was all done in a very subtle kind of way. But they let him know who the boss was. And sure enough, the next day, he put out another tweet saying, actually, I'm not going to release everything. I'm going to release a few files, but not everything.
Yeah.
And
Few
I'll
files
revisit
that mean
this in
nothing. Yeah.
2018.
Yeah.
Then he kicked the can down the road to Biden. Biden has now kicked the can down the road 3 times. And, several Kennedy historians that I'm associated with, the Mary Farrell Foundation, are currently suing Joe Biden and this administration for those JFK files.
Yeah.
We're not going to let them get away with this. But you know what they're going to do, Kevin? They're going to drag this out. They're going to stall and try to keep this from ever going to court. President Biden,
Yeah.
back on the 4th of July, basically, put out an executive order, a declaration saying that, well, JFK Records Act is expired, so I don't have to comply with it. So there. And we're like, nope, we're going to court. We're going to court. We're going to fight you. But I doubt that case will be resolved because the government will delay before the next election. And again, that's another reason why I'm supporting RFK. He has pledged to release all of the files on day 1 of his administration. Of course he will.
It's his family, it's his family's name. So
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
So you want to take
Well,
another
Lori-
look at another clip? Or have we got time?
I have time. If you have time, you're the one who's up in the middle of the
In the
night.
middle of the
so-
night? Hey, I'm all coffeeed up and wide awake. So you want to watch some more?
Sure.
Okay. Let's see. Let me bring this screen up for you. And I know this is like torture, but I think it's really important, especially for the folks over there watching in Russia. If you hadn't seen what happened this week in our Congress, it's quite a shit show.
Me, not Republicans, that millions of Americans were not exposed to that story. Had they been, we know they might have voted differently. We'll never be able to unwind history, but categories of speech that the government suppressed, that's unconstitutional scheme.
Well, the court made findings on that. I just quote them: opposition to COVID-19 vaccines, COVID-19, opposition.
We're
to
almost
President
there. I
Biden's
queued back a little
policies,
too far, but
saying
we're
the
almost
Hunter
there.
Biden laptop story was
Yeah.
true. Opposition to the policies of government officials in power, all were suppressed. And that's just some examples. Many other examples in the court's findings and in the discovery in the case.
I so wish I weren't out of time. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes Mr. Allred from Texas for his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield my time to Ms.
I want to thank the gentleman from Texas. Mr. Kennedy's and others have been censored, but they actually have a huge megaphone. The rules that my colleague tried to bring up were rules that the Republicans made at the beginning of this Congress. They did not allow the Democrats to be part of that. And one of those rules was that if information or testimony might potentially defame, and not to give him the megaphone that this group has allowed him to have. I also note, in terms of censorship, that the far right media has already issued articles about me playing the race card. The race card is something that's often used against Black people for bringing up when they see race hatred being propagated against them. And it's a means to try and keep us quiet, to keep us in our place. Oh, you're playing the race card by bringing up what is obvious in our lives, what is obviously happening, race. And so you keep saying I'm race baiting and try and censor me, but I'm going to continue to tell the truth. I want to be abundantly clear about what else is happening in this room. The MAGA Republicans are trying to scare social media companies into not taking down blatantly false information in the lead up to our 2024 presidential election. Chair Jordan knows, as we do, that when conspiracy theories succeed, so does Donald Trump. Russia interfered in our 2016 election, they attempted in our 2020, and they're going to try to interfere in the 2024 presidential election. We note that Russian trolls sought to suppress the Black vote by unleashing a torrent of social media posts designed to stoke racial tensions and spread incorrect voting information. In 2021, our national intelligence agencies found that proactive information sharing between the government and social media companies facilitated the expeditious review and, in many cases, removal of social media accounts covertly operated by Russia and Iran. Ms. Wiley, if the government is not able to proactively share information with social media companies in 2024, what is likely to have be the ramifications? And I'd ask that you make your answer as succinct as possible because there's a lot of information I need.
I will just quote one thing. Mr. Prigozhin, who's been in the news of late, actually said explicitly and openly that they would continue to try to spread mis and disinformation into the United States and interfere with our elections.
Thank you. They know that Russian interference, that is, the MAGA Republicans know that Trump benefits when Russia interferes. The super PAC that supports, the same super PAC that supports Mr. Kennedy and has raised significant funds on his behalf is run by a man named Jason Bowles. Here's Jason Bowles' Twitter profile, as you can see up on the screen. Jason Bowles isn't just a MAGA supporter. He also ran the super PAC for MAGA Republicans Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, George Santos, and in 2022, he supported Herschel Walker. So the person behind Mr. Kennedy's super PAC is an individual who personally and professionally wants the Republican Party to succeed. Yet, Mr. Kennedy is running as a Democrat. Ms. Wiley, will it benefit Mr. Kennedy as well as the other individuals that are supported by the super PAC if social media companies are less able to detect and, if needed, if they determine that it's needed, to remove Russian covert information designed to suppress votes in this country?
It is possible.
Thank you. I yield back.
Can I yield the remainder of the time?
Gentlelady yields back. I now recognize Mr. Stubbe from Florida for his 5 minutes.
Mr. Kennedy, do you want to respond to that? Can you do that quickly?
Yeah, I've never heard of Mr. Bowles, and I've never heard of that super PAC. This is typical of the accusations against me at this hearing. They are baseless. Every single one I've been subjected to a string, a parade of defamations. If I believe those things about myself, I wouldn't want to hear me either. You want to gag me and in a room somewhere. None of those are true, and they were all of this parade of accusations and defamations were made against me in a way that was calculated to make sure that I could not respond to any of them. Every one of them I'd like to respond to. I was not allowed to.
Yeah, I wanted to ask your thoughts on that one, Kevin, that particular bit, because it specifically regards Russia, Prigozhin's efforts supposedly to influence our elections. And what are your thoughts on that?
You know, Prigozhin is a big mouth businessman who is not taken seriously in his own country. So, you know, you can't go based on anything he says. Now, he's parroting what I think Medvedev actually said that at one point. And he was, you know, they made a big deal about it in the Western media. Yes, we have been interfering in the elections and we're going to continue doing so. But he was being sarcastic in the context of being accused when it had already been proven that it wasn't true. So Prigozhin isn't taken seriously in Russia, particularly after his latest antics. So choosy heretics, yeah, I've been getting some sun. So
you do look like you've got a nice tan going there in the Crimea sun.
Yeah, it's sunny year round here. So
yeah, except when the missiles are flying. For goodness sake, I hope things quiet down for you. Have the attacks stopped for the day?
Yeah, I haven't heard anything today. You know, yesterday we had, or day before yesterday, daytime strikes too, which is unusual.
That is unusual.
Russia usually fires between 1 and 3 in the morning because you can't see the incoming missiles. harder to track them. So
Yeah, those are usually nighttime operations. Very surprised to hear that's going on in the daytime. Were those defensive? I would presume so.
on our
Or
part,
you're talking about the Ukrainian strikes were daytime strikes on you?
oh no, the Ukrainian ones, one was 3 a.m.
Right.
The
The Kirk
two on
Bridge.
the old ammo depots were daytime strikes,
Hmm.
but this is the first time Russia has done a daytime strike on the
Interesting.
Odessa port. So
Very interesting. They've been hitting
So
Odessa hard, really hard.
yeah, they're getting serious. So let's see if we got any other questions here before we wrap up.
Anybody have any Kennedy questions for me? Any questions about Mr. Kennedy? Happy to answer. If you do, drop a comment.
Yeah.
I hope he was
So-
understood. You know, I mean, at least he finally had his chance to speak. And they tried and tried and tried to take his microphone away, to turn off the television cameras, to get him behind closed doors to testify in executive session. And I have to thank the Republicans on that committee, particularly Representatives Massey, Representatives Johnson of Louisiana, and Jim Jordan, the chair. I thought Jordan ran his committee in a very fair manner, and he did make sure that Bobby got his time and got to speak his truth. And I just hope that the American people out there could see through the lies, the smears, the garbage that they threw at him, and that they, you know, I actually think, Kevin, that he won a lot of votes, which is that's what they were really worried about. Don't you think?
Right.
When they were talking
Yeah.
about, oh, Russia's going to try and influence our next election. What are we going to do? I think if you translate that, what they're really saying is, no, we're scared that Kennedy's winning a lot of votes here, and we're going to blame the Russians if he wins. You know, they're already they're laying the groundwork for another Trump-Russia debacle, don't you think?
Well, everything that happens in the United States is Russia's fault. So,
right.
Imugi wants to know why Mr. Kennedy does not signal more towards the mainstream left. I actually think he does a lot, but you have thoughts?
I think he's just too honest, Kevin, to claim positions that he does not sincerely believe. That's why he has not budged on the Israel-Palestine issue. You know, the fact that he supports Israel so strongly has alienated many voters on the left, on the progressive left, who support Palestine, and a lot of Democrats. But this is what he truly, sincerely believes, whether he's right or whether he's wrong. I personally disagree with him on that issue, but I'm not going to let that change my support for him, because I know that it is a sincerely held belief that he has. And I also know that Kennedy is persuadable. Before we go, I'll tell you a personal story. I've known him since 2007. I was actually part of a Draft Kennedy movement in 2007. After 8 years of Bush, I wanted him to run and save America even then. It was not the right time for Bobby then. He still had young children, and he wanted to be a dad. He wanted to be there for his kids. If you consider how he lost his father, and you consider that he came from a family of 11 kids, they all grew up without their dad, and it took a tremendous and often deadly toll on his siblings. Many of them fell into drug abuse, bad habits. He lost a brother to a drug overdose, David.
Yeah.
You know, it's all because they grew up without a dad. So he was not about to go into politics and risk being killed, because he is, after all, a Kennedy. And as he himself said, all the way back in 1977, when someone asked him if he was scared to run for office someday because they might kill him, he said, assassination is an occupational hazard in politics. So he knows the stakes. He knows the stakes, and he's not afraid. He just had to wait for the right time when his kids were grown, when his wife supported him. His wife Cheryl does support him, but boy, is she under attack now. Now, they're trying to sick his own family on him. They've come at him with his sister Carrie, with Joe Kennedy III. They've all issued these denouncements of him this past week. And Jack Schlossberg, President Kennedy's grandson, Caroline Kennedy's son, just put out a statement yesterday condemning and denouncing Bobby. And that's very sad to see that happening.
It's not only sad, but it has to make you wonder what's behind it. I'd like to see some of those bank accounts.
Indeed. So would I.
And it's not just his father, his uncle. He has considerable experience with assassinations in his family.
Unfortunately, he does.
Yeah.
And he knows those are the risks, folks, and he's willing to put his life on the line for his country, for you, for me. He's willing to take a bullet for us. Let me repeat that. He's willing to take a bullet for us.
So, if anybody wants to help Lori in supporting RFK Jr., she has a message pinned to her Twitter account. Oh, there's my camera. Over there under her, not under me.
I'm bad at this too. There it is.
You can go there, and she has what you can do to help her to help Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
You can sign up to join my team of volunteers if you'd like to work with me. We're going to put this man on our shoulders, and we're going to carry him to the White House in 2024. Just go to kennedy24.com/Lori Spencer, and you can join my team. You can donate. You can buy some merchandise. So if you're over there in Russia, you can walk around with a Kennedy T-shirt or ball cap and get some interesting comments.
I would. Unfortunately, you can't send that stuff here.
Oh, that's right. You cannot purchase it if you're not in the United States. But hint, you can buy it on Amazon or other places. You don't have to buy it directly from the campaign. I didn't say that.
Yeah,
you can.
They don't ship it here either. No postal
Amazon?
service, nothing.
Really?
No postal, no DHL, no FedEx, no UPS. They all stopped shipping here. So you cannot even send a letter to Russia.
Really? I didn't know that. Is that the sanctions? Or just virtue signaling?
Virtue signaling mostly.
I see.
Corporate postal service isn't sanctioning anybody. They just refuse to deliver here.
Wow. So the United States Postal Service won't do it either.
Yep.
Interesting.
There are a couple of there's a couple of private couriers that if you do want stuff and you're willing to pay big money for it, you can get the stuff over here. So it costs about $60 to ship a letter over here.
A letter.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, it's a good thing we have email, huh?
Yeah.
I can talk to you in real time. We don't have to ship packages back and forth, thankfully. Shipping packages is so 20th century anyway, right? We do it all virtually.
Unless you want a cup or something, yeah.
Right? So I can't send you a Kennedy T-shirt, huh?
Can't send me a Kennedy T-shirt either.
Dang.
I'll have to order it from China where they're probably made.
As a matter of fact, they are. I don't know about the official Kennedy merchandise, but I'll tell you, I just bought a big Kennedy 24 flag. The campaign isn't offering them, so I bought it off of Amazon. And sure enough, it was made in China and shipped from China.
Of course.
And by the way, it's very well made, excellent quality, nice fabric. It's not cheap, even though I bought it super, super cheap. But it's actually a very well-made product, and I'm happy with it. And it's not even official merchandise. But, once again, the Chinese are outdoing us. And, Kennedy wants to change that too. He's not a hawk on China. He doesn't want to go to war with China. But he does want to have real trade competition with China. and
Yeah.
get the United States back in the game of producing our own stuff. And
Yeah.
I'm all for that. We stopped making our own stuff a long time ago, and we're relying way too much on other countries like China. But we need to be doing that. So I foresee a friendly and healthy competition with China, not the kind of war footing that we're on with the Biden administration. And honestly, Trump is starting to take a troubling turn against China and North Korea.
Again. Yeah. Again.
Yeah. I don't like to hear that kind of talk from Trump.
Yeah.
I want to go
It-
back to the days when he was meeting Kim Jong-un over there at the demilitarized zone for a handshake. I don't want
Yeah.
to see us go back to the days of more Cold War rhetoric. And it disturbs me very much when I hear Trump say things like he did a couple of weeks back, where he's like, when I'm president, I'm going to restrict immigration from all communist countries. No commies allowed in the United States. That's sounding pretty McCarthyite to me.
Yeah.
I don't like the sound of it. You don't have to be a communist to think that that's wrong. I'm no communist. I'm a libertarian. But I don't want to go back in time to the Cold War, and I see us backpedaling. We're going that way. And it seems that
think
Trump will take us there, and so will Joe Biden.
we're already there.
We're there.
So.
We are. We are. So I feel like the remedy is Kennedy. It's the only way, our only hope at this point for peace with the Russians who don't want to hurt us. The Chinese, they're not going to invade us. They don't want a war with us. North Korea, they don't want a war with us. They just want us to leave them alone and get our military bases the hell out of their sphere. Kennedy's promised to close all of our military bases too.
Stay the heck out of Taiwan.
Right.
We believe in one China, but we're going to sell them a bunch of weapons to attack China with.
There you go. There you go. That's the double speak. It's that Orwellian double speak that we keep getting from the Biden administration, from our government.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like they said, we're not trying to censor Kennedy at the hearing when they were clearly trying to censor it.
Yeah. We're not censoring him. No, we're not censoring him.
Turn his mic off.
Yeah.
We're not trying to censor you. What kind of gaslighting is that, really?
Yeah.
I'm ashamed. At times like these, Kevin, I'm almost ashamed to be an American. And I didn't have much hope for 2024 until this April when Kennedy got in the race. It looked to me like it was going to be Trump versus Biden again, a rematch, the sequel to 2020. I wasn't looking forward to that. I didn't see how I could support either one. And I didn't have a candidate that I could support. And then my old friend Bobby decided, oh, what the hell, I'll run. So I'm so glad he did. I'm so glad he's in this race.
I wish him luck, and I wish you luck in getting him elected.
Thanks. I'm going to need it.
Yeah. Yeah. And anything we can do to help you get the word out, I'm here for you. So
thank you. I have a little good news before I go.
Yeah.
After Kennedy's testimony, the campaign raised $5 million in donations in a single day. I think
Really?
that's a sign. Yes.
That's a good sign.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
In one day, the American people stepped up and they opened their pocketbooks and they said, go get Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Win.
Cool.
Go get him. We want you to win. So when I see those donations pouring in like that after that contentious hearing, that tells me that the American people are on our side.
Yeah.
Most of
And
them.
I would encourage Peter to vote for him in the next election, but unfortunately, mail ballots don't work here.
Oh, yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah, if you're a citizen over there in Russia, you should be able to vote absentee. But if the mail service won't deliver the ballot, how does that work?
Until last year, you could go to the U.S. Embassy in Moscow and vote.
Right.
But the U.S. Embassy doesn't allow people in anymore, only for emergency passport renewals. So if you want to do anything as an American in Russia, you have to fly to Poland.
You're kidding. Really?
No.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So you really don't even know if you can vote in the next election?
Yeah, unless I'm willing to spend the money to fly to Poland and go to the embassy there. And of course, those of us living in Russia are not their best friends.
Well, of course. That would be a perilous journey to make, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
That's taking a risk potentially with your life just to vote.
Well, it's not even a risk for life. It's that the embassy staff in Poland is not friendly to those who live in Russia.
Mm-hmm.
They do
I'm
not
sure.
like to help. In fact,
Mm.
the embassy staff in Russia is not helpful to anybody.
Mm.
So you can contact them and they will tell you it's not our problem.
I thought that we closed our embassy in Moscow, so it's still open, but not really open. Like if you need help, they're not going to help you unless it's an emergency, huh?
Correct. You can
Wow.
make an appointment to go renew a passport if it affects your legal stay in Russia.
That's it. That's literally all
That's
you
it.
can do. Incredible, man. That's incredible. All the more reason that we have to negotiate a peace as soon as possible and get back on a good foot if it's not too late between our two countries. We need that.
Yeah. Peter
Just so you can
wants to
vote.
text me. Yeah.
Just so you can vote, brother. I can't believe that you are literally being denied the right to vote as an American citizen. But you are in a roundabout way. They're going to say they're not
In a
denying you the
roundabout way.
right to vote, just like they're not censoring Kennedy. And we didn't blow up the Nord Stream pipeline. But yeah, they're
It's
messing
the
with your
same as
right to vote.
renewing a passport. They really want you to go back to the United States to renew it. And then because you have that Russian visa stamp in it, they're sitting on people's passports. So I do recommend people that are coming to Russia, when you apply for your passport, tell them you're going to Eastern Europe. It's not a lie. Do not tell them you're going to Russia. I know people who applied as a family, and one family had one of their sons, they put his social security number in wrong. Could have been a mistake. The second issue they had was the same son had his address inputted incorrectly on the same application. And these were things that were checked at the post office when they applied to make sure they were correct. But when they got to Washington, things...
Hello there. I have a cat that just jumped up here. If you saw something black, it's a cat tail.
Yep, I saw the tail.
That's my kitty. Hello. He wants to be on TV. This is Jack. Guess who I named him after? President Kennedy. And his wife is named Jackie.
Yep.
And they have twin offspring, a boy and a girl, John and Caroline.
Cool.
They're the Kennedy cats.
Yeah. It's a cat
Yep, I'm
sound.
that kind of cat lady. I name my cats after the Kennedys.
Yeah.
If you go to a
dog-
wide shot, you can have a good look at him. He's sitting here going, "Hey, notice me. Hello, world. I want the people of Russia to see me."
Yeah.
Show everybody your
Let's find
cute
the wide
face.
shot one. There we go.
There
No,
he
that's...
is. Turn the camera down
There
a
we
little so you can see this handsome fella. Aren't you a handsome fella? Oh yeah, I know the Russian people love their cats, and he's a good boy. You can't have him; he's mine. He's all mine. That's my boy. Don't get jealous.
Oh, Ilya. Hello, Ilya. This is my friend Ilya here on the screen right now.
Hello. Hello. Well, Kev, I've enjoyed this. It's always such a pleasure to talk with you, my friend. And we will see you very soon on Maverick News. Have you back soon.
I will. Just ping me anytime. You know I'm here. So.
Well, there's always news in Crimea these days, so we need you. Please stay safe.
Yeah. All right.
You and your
Thank
family,
you.
all my best to you.
It's been our honor to have you, Lori. Bye.
Thank you.
Oh, there we go. Well,